Hello and welcome to Starbound's second channel. My name is Gabriel the Bibi Capaldi and I'll be your narrator today. But before we get into today's story, please do check down below that you are subscribed to the channel. It's 100% free and helps us pop up on your feed a bit more often.
We will torture him. We have so little, not even a homeworld. And yet this human thinks he can come here and get in the way of our business and that nothing will happen to him. But first, we need to capture him. We will use you as bait. He will have no idea what's coming for him,
said Brevard, looking in the eyes of his assistant Logara, as he watched her slow transformation, her body slowly losing its previous features and morphing into the shape of a human. Brevard himself would have gladly abandoned his tall, muscular Graxian skin to have morphed into a female human shape, but for a matter of mental state alone, he avoided taking female forms, which tended to demand a matching personality, something his strong demeanor struggled with. The ability to mimic wasn't merely physical for their species, it was also related to the original form they were born in, and despite it being possible for him to assume a female body, Brevard found female behavior particularly difficult to emulate convincingly. He smiled as the hardened blue texture of Logara's previous form gave way to that soft and pinkish human skin color. Not bothered she hadn't replied, since he knew very well that her vocal cords were more than likely in the middle of the process of assuming human shape. The transformation always started from the core and worked outward, first internal organs, then musculature, and finally external features. It was a mesmerizing process to witness, even after decades of seeing it, and doing it himself. She opened her now green eyes as a small patch of black hair grew atop her head, in a matter of seconds growing past her sinking ears. Next came eyelashes, growing long and turning black in a short moment. Her face softened, losing the angular features of her previously stolen form, replaced by rounder, more delicate human characteristics. Her nose shrank, nostrils adjusting to the thinner atmosphere humans were adapted to breathe. Her mouth widened slightly, lips plumping with a reddish hue as the final touches completed her facial transformation. As her transformation continued, Brevard walked across their hidden lab, ignoring the many different machines on the side, and focusing his full attention on the universal printer that was creating human clothes for Logara. The lab was dimly lit with a yellowish glow emanating from the various consoles and equipment scattered throughout the space. Condensation dripped from pipes running along the ceiling, a common problem in the neglected industrial sector they had claimed as their base of operations. Brevard approached the compartment of the universal printer, which had just completed its fabrication cycle with a soft ding. Inside, he found a strange dress, and the first thought when he transferred it to his hands was that it looked quite disproportional. Too large in the upper part and too thin in the middle. The fabric felt alien to his touch, soft and flowing unlike the practical synthetic materials Graxians, his current form, preferred. He examined it with confusion, holding it up by what he assumed were shoulder straps, trying to visualize how it would fit onto a human form. He moved back to Logara, navigating through the maze of equipment that littered the lab floor. Various data terminals blinked around him, monitoring systems across the city and scanning for any mention of Marak activity, reflecting their instinctive fear of being discovered by the authorities. When Brevard returned to his previous spot, he noticed her transformation was nearly complete, and he immediately understood why the dress was shaped like that. Logara's new human form included two prominent rounded protrusions on her chest, balanced by wider hips and a narrower waist than any Graxian would possess. The strange proportions of the garment suddenly made sense, though they still seemed wildly impractical to his Graxian sensibilities.
Those mammalian glands are so disproportionate to the thin belly,
Brevard remarked, his voice carrying the distinctive flat undertone of the Graxian vocal cords.
I don't understand how humans maintain balance with such an uneven distribution of mass.
Their species was only able to see the world through the lenses of their current skin, and right now, as a Graxian, Brevard was unable to see anything besides weirdness in her shape. The hormonal and neurological components of transformation made it difficult to appreciate other forms when they weren't wearing them themselves.
"How do you see me now? Through the perspective of a human?"
he asked, genuinely curious. She began to scan him with her eyes, the movement smoother and more fluid than the mechanical sharpness of her previously Graxian gaze. Brevard's body currently was a bipedal shape, a muscular build with bone protruding from the sides of his skull, giving him a crown-like appearance. His skin was a mottled green with patches of tougher, scale-like texture across his shoulders and spine. Standing nearly 2 meters tall, his arms were disproportionately long, ending in 3-fingered hands with sharp, retractable claws. His legs were digitigrade, giving him a perpetual appearance of being on his toes, and his feet were broad with splayed toes for stability. "You don't look more disgusting than usual to me," Lugara said, her voice now higher and melodious compared to her previous guttural Graxian tones. "Perhaps humans are more open to differences than most species. Their planet has such biodiversity that they're accustomed to varied forms. They even keep other species as companions in their homes." She seemed to be processing these thoughts as they came to her. The human brain was now processed, making connections her previous Graxian mind wouldn't have.
"Must be some weird human quirk,"
he commented, thinking nothing of it. The psychological aspects of transformation always fascinated him, how the borrowed biology influenced perception and thought patterns. Then Brevard carelessly threw the dress at her and ordered,
"Get dressed. The human will be a guest at the Troverian party tonight, and we can target him there. We need to move quickly."
Logara began to get dressed, struggling somewhat with the unfamiliar garment. "How sure are you that the bait will work?" she asked, pulling the dress over her head. "No smart creature would agree to leave the event security perimeter with an unknown individual. It seems too simple." Brevard only laughed, his sharp teeth gleaming in the dim light.
"I've done my research and concluded human males are likely to fall for this trick. They very rarely fear their own females. When it's clear, they obviously should."
He shook his head in amusement.
"Their females are often more cunning, yet the males lower their guard completely in the presence of an attractive one. Another odd human quirk."
She only nodded, still struggling to make the dress fit her newly acquired form, the stolen DNA still taking full effect. The fabric caught on her uneven curves, and she twisted awkwardly, trying to adjust it properly.
"Be fast,"
Brevard said impatiently.
"We can't waste time, or we might lose our chance to capture the human. The Troverian parties never last long, and our intelligence suggests he'll only make a brief appearance to satisfy diplomatic protocol."
His claws clicked against the metal console as he checked the time.
"We have a narrow window of opportunity, and I don't want to waste it because you're having trouble with primitive human coverings."
4 hours later, Brevard sat in the driver's seat of his floating vehicle, parked a discreet distance from the Troverian embassy where the reception was being held. The sleek, obsidian craft hovered silently a few centimeters above the ground, its stealth systems ensuring it remained inconspicuous to casual observers and most security scans. Through the one-way transport canopy, he had a clear view of the embassy's entrance, where various alien dignitaries arrived in much more ostentatious vehicles than his own. Right now, Logara was inside, her mission to bait the human into this floater vehicle, where the doors would lock when he entered and they would transport him to an abandoned warehouse. There, they would extract information from the human and give him a scare so bad they would hopefully ensure he left this world of his own free will. The last thing they wanted was killing him and triggering a police investigation that could hinder their operations. The Marak had spent decades establishing their underground network on this trade hub world, and they couldn't risk losing it all because of one troublesome human diplomat who'd started asking too many questions about certain shipping manifests. Brevard worried, using a datapad to check both of the little disposable cameras he had installed close to the entrance, and his own eyes to stare through the window. The night air was filled with the ambient noise of the bustling alien metropolis, the low noise of anti-grav engines, the distant throbbing of industrial machinery, and the mixture of 100 different species communicating in their native tongues. Overhead, the 3 moons of Navarro cast a faint white glow over the cityscape, their light reflecting off the glass surfaces of the commercial district. A smile crossed his face when he noticed Logara approaching in the distance, and his smile was mostly because she wasn't alone. The human was laughing beside her, completely unaware he was about to be captured and tortured, and that they planned to scare him out of this world for good, causing him to have nightmares of this place for the rest of his days. From this distance, the human looked unremarkable. Standard bipedal form, tailored diplomatic outfit, and that distinctive hair covering only the top of the head that marked his species. Yet this unassuming creature had been causing the Marak no end of trouble with his persistent investigations. Brevard tried to make himself hidden, trying to use his seat to conceal his distinctly non-human silhouette. He feared the human might resist entering the vehicle, and he didn't want to be forced to use weapons in the street, even if it was non-lethal force just to put this human to sleep. The consequences of public violence would be severe, not just legal repercussions, but the unwanted attention it would bring to the Marak community trying to survive in the shadows of this world. They had endured enough persecution across the galaxy. They didn't need another world closing its borders to them. To his utmost surprise, his fear proved unnecessary when the human didn't think twice before entering through the back door with Logara. The man stumbled slightly as he climbed in, but showed no hesitation or suspicion. Brevard could hardly believe their plan was working so flawlessly. After all, the elaborate preparations and contingencies they had developed, the target had simply walked into their trap without resistance. Logara followed him quickly and locked the door behind her, the mechanism engaging with a subtle click that seemed to echo in Brevard's anxious mind. The sound triggered the automated security protocols, effectively sealing the human's fate. The vehicle's internal systems silently reconfigured to human containment mode, ready to incapacitate their captive should he become unruly. Now that the human was unable to leave, Brevard looked behind, smiling triumphantly, only for his words to die in his throat when he felt an intense smell of alcohol coming from the human. The pungent, sweet odor filled the confined space, almost making Brevard's sensitive Graxian olfactory receptors recoil. It was clear this human had consumed a significant quantity of fermented beverages during the reception. The human just laughed when he locked eyes with Brevard. "She didn't tell me she had an alien boyfriend. Can you believe it?" After he said that, he simply began to cough, and Brevard and Logara exchanged a long look of disbelief. This was not the reaction they had anticipated from someone who suddenly found himself in the presence of a Graxian, a species known across the galaxy for their imposing and somewhat frightening appearance. The silence lingered a bit after the human's cough stopped, and before they could say anything to scare him, he embraced Logara and a snoring sound began to emanate from him. His head slumped against her shoulder, his body going limp as consciousness apparently abandoned him completely. She seemed a little uncomfortable in this position, asking in a pleading tone, "What should we do now?" Her human features registered confusion and disgust as the inebriated diplomat drooled slightly onto a new dress. Brevard took some time to react to the absurdity of the situation, but eventually he said,
"It's better this way. The fool will wake up in the warehouse, strapped to a chair for the biggest scare of his life."
He ordered her.
"Keep him in this position because he's behaving, and it's better to avoid a fight."
In truth, Brevard was relieved. An unconscious captive was far easier to transport than a struggling one. She agreed, adjusting her position to better support the slumbering human, and finally, Brevard turned on the vehicle and they began their journey to the abandoned warehouse. The craft rose higher in the sky, joining the streams of nighttime traffic flowing between the towering structures of the city. Brevard navigated through the less monitored sky lanes, avoiding the main routes where security scans might identify a human life sign in a vehicle registered to a non-human owner. As they flew, Brevard contemplated the journey that had brought him to this point. Like all Marak, he had been born with the innate ability to mimic other species, a trait engineered into their ancestors by a long-forgotten civilization that had created them as infiltration weapons. But the Marak had evolved beyond their programming, developing consciousness and eventually rebelling against their creators. That victory had been short-lived, however, as the galaxy learned to fear and hate them for the very abilities that had given them freedom. Without a homeworld to call their own, the Marak had scattered across the stars, forming small communities where they could, often living on the fringes of society. Some, like Brevard, had turned to less savory means of survival, leveraging their unique abilities for profit in the galactic underworld. It wasn't the life he would have chosen, but with entire systems closed to his kind and mimic detection technology standard at most ports of entry, options were limited. The humans' interference threatened everything he had built on this world, one of the few places where the Marak had established a sustainable presence. This diplomat had stumbled onto their smuggling operation purely by accident, but his curiosity could not be allowed to continue. A proper scare would send him running back to Earth with tales of alien hostility, ensuring no more humans would be sent to replace him. The warehouse district loomed ahead, a sprawling maze of abandoned industrial complexes from the planet's earlier boom era. He slowed the vehicle as they approached, activating the concealed entrance to their makeshift base. A section of what appeared to be solid wall shimmered and became transparent, revealing a narrow access tunnel just wide enough for their vehicle. Brevard guided them inside, the false wall re-solidifying behind them, concealing their presence once more. The tunnel opened into a cavernous space that had once been a manufacturing floor. Now, it housed their operation, part laboratory, part storage facility, and part interrogation chamber. As the vehicle settled onto the landing pad, Brevard turned to Logara, still awkwardly supporting the unconscious human.
"Get him secured in the chair. I'll prepare the interrogation protocols."
He exited the craft, his claws clicking against the concrete floor as he moved toward the control panel. Behind him, Logara struggled to maneuver the dead weight of the human diplomat out of the vehicle, staring at him with eyes that were clearly asking for help, but he ignored her and, instead, prepared the chair the human would be tied to. For all their advanced technology and shape-shifting abilities, some tasks remained stubbornly physical. She eventually managed to half-drag, half-carry him to the chair, where securing his limbs with the restraints proved easier than transporting him. Brevard watched with satisfaction as the human was locked into place, completely vulnerable and still blissfully unaware of his predicament. Soon, very soon, this meddlesome creature would learn the consequences of interfering with the Marak, and if all went according to plan, his terrified reports would ensure his backwater trading post remained a safe haven for Brevard's people for years to come. The human stirred slightly in his bonds, mumbling something incoherent before settling back into his alcohol-induced slumber. Brevard smiled, his sharp teeth visible. Let him rest while he could. The real nightmare would begin when he awoke. "What's the plan for the torture, boss?" Logara asked, her voice still carrying that peculiar human timbre. She stood over the unconscious man strapped to the chair, studying his slack features with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The human's head lolled to one side, a thin line of drool escaping from the corner of his mouth. Brevard moved to a control panel nearby. The warehouse's lighting shifted, now focused on the chair.
"We'll play bad cop, good cop,"
he explained, activating a series of monitoring devices that would record the human's vital signs during the interrogation.
"But the catch is that you'll reveal your true form at some point and ensure this human will have nightmares for the rest of his miserable life."
She nodded slowly, her borrowed human features forming an expression of determination. "Is there any specific information we want to extract from him?" Logara asked, circling the unconscious human with slow steps. "Or is the fear factor our primary objective?"
"Scaring him is the primary goal,"
Brevard replied, his eyes narrowing.
"But it would be interesting to know what humans think of our species. They must truly hate the Marak for how good of a job he's doing to prevent our smuggling operations."
There was a bitter edge to his words, the accumulated resentment of centuries of persecution coloring his tone.
"All species from the Council have always been quick to judge what they don't understand. The humans won't be difficult."
She agreed with a slight nod, her gaze lingering on the human's peaceful face. "Should we wait for him to wake up on his own?" Logara asked, seeming somewhat reluctant to disturb the diplomat's slumber.
"We don't have that much time,"
Brevard said dismissively.
"Get a bucket of cold water. That should do the trick."
He gestured towards the back of the warehouse where their supplies were stored.
"Make it ice cold if possible. I want him fully alert for what's coming."
She complied with his request, and soon she disappeared in the middle of the containers to retrieve the water. As he waited, Brevard decided he would find himself a chair to sit comfortably in front of the human. He would be the good cop and extract information from the human as Logara tortured him. The approach was ancient but effective, a psychological game of contrasts designed to manipulate the captive into trusting the seemingly sympathetic interrogator. He dragged a sturdy metal chair from the corner, positioning it carefully opposite the human's restraint chair. Brevard placed his own chair under a spotlight, arranging the scene so both himself and the human would be sitting face to face as the human remained unconscious. The theatrical setup was intentional. Fear worked best when it played on primal instincts, and the lighting would disorient the human while emphasizing Brevard's alien features. The rest of the warehouse would fade into murky shadows, creating an infinite void in the human's perception, a limitless space where unseen horrors might lurk. Logara returned, carrying a metal bucket that sloshed with water as she walked. She paused, noticing the arrangement of the chairs. "Why the two chairs?" she asked, her brow furrowing in confusion.
"I'll be the good cop,"
Brevard explained, settling into his seat and adjusting his posture to appear more imposing.
"And you'll make the human regret being alive."
He noticed her staring at their captive, an expression crossing her human features that he recognized as reluctance. For a moment, he worried she might falter. But then she squared her shoulders. "I'll do what's needed for the future of our kind," she said firmly, though something in her tone suggested she was trying to convince herself as much as Brevard.
"Good,"
Brevard nodded approvingly.
"Now, the cold water."
Logara approached the unconscious human and, without hesitation, emptied the bucket of water directly onto his head. The liquid cascaded over the man's face and torso, soaking his formal attire and causing him to sputter awake with a violent jerk against his restraints. The human's eyes flew open, wild and disoriented. He coughed and gasped, shaking his head to clear the water from his face. After a moment of confusion, he attempted to introduce himself, his voice hoarse.
"I'm, Noah, Sebastian, Earth Diplomatic Corps."
His gaze darted around the dimly lit warehouse before settling on his bound wrists.
"Why am I tied to a chair?"
He seemed less affected by the alcohol now, the cold shock having jolted him into sobriety. Brevard exchanged a look with Logara, and she understood what he meant without words. She began slapping the human on the face with both hands, hitting him without a lot of strength in her blows, but compensating with the sheer amount of them. The sharp sounds of palm against cheek echoed through the warehouse constantly. Noah looked utterly confused when she finally stopped. His cheeks reddened, but his expression more bewildered than frightened. Brevard was about to start playing his good cop part, leaning forward with fake concern on his features.
"Are you aware of the reason we brought you here, human?"
Brevard asked, his voice deliberately softer than usual, the metallic edge tempered to seem almost compassionate. Noah's eyes darted between Logara and him. His reply was shock itself.
The
Boyfriend watching from the chair and the hot girlfriend playing rough with the guy she picked up at the party? He said, a grin spreading across his face despite his predicament. He laughed, the sound echoing in the cavernous space. I've heard of this arrangement, but I never thought aliens could be this kinky. Brevard was speechless, not only failing to understand what Noah had said, but misinterpreting it as some form of provocation. The human's casual demeanor in the face of what should have been a terrifying situation completely derailed Brevard's carefully planned interrogation. He felt his control of the situation slipping, and reacted instinctively. Breaking the good cop act entirely, Brevard directly ordered Logara,
"Bite him."
He wasn't expecting her to bite strongly enough to draw blood, but undoubtedly strongly enough to cause pain, a lot of it. This human needed to understand the gravity of his situation. She hesitated a moment but complied, leaning forward and biting Noah's neck. Then his ear, her hands grabbing the human's arm as her nails pressed against his muscles. The human's formal attire tore slightly under her assault, exposing patches of his pale skin. Brevard saw the human contorting in the chair, yet he didn't seem to be too bothered by the pain. The most disturbing part was that he was smiling the whole time, as if this assault was something he welcomed rather than feared. Brevard's gaze hinted for her to stop, and when she pulled away, he finally said,
"Human, you might be playing tough, but I promise you, she hasn't even shown you 10% of what she can do. We can do this either the easy way or the hard way. What do you choose?"
Laughing like a fool, Noah stared at Brevard and said, "Oh, the hard way sounds very good to me." His eyes gleamed with an enthusiasm that was entirely inappropriate for someone being threatened with torture. Brevard rose from the chair in rage at this response.
"This human is not taking us seriously,"
he screamed, his patience exhausted. He stared into Logara's eyes and added,
"Show him your true form, Logara."
She nodded, and as Noah's eyes remained wide open, she lowered her head in front of him. Suddenly, her skin began to change from one pattern to another, her features quickly altering through a range of many different species, only for it to stop in a pattern with sharp teeth and green skin. Her transformation was deliberately jarring, designed to maximize the psychological impact as her human appearance melted away to reveal the predatory forms beneath. Brevard was staring at Noah's lowered jaw, now certain that this human would start to beg for his life and scream. This was the moment when captives always broke, when the full realization of the Marak's terrifying abilities sank in. Yet, to everyone's utter surprise, he simply said, "Holy shit! You're a shapeshifter! A Marak! How can this night get any better?" Logara slowly turned to Brevard with a look of shock and defeat in her eyes, her features gradually returning to human form as if deflated by the human's unexpected reaction. Her transformation, their most reliable weapon of intimidation, had somehow backfired completely. Brevard noticed his hand was shaking. How could this human be that resistant mentally? That was their go-to trick to scare other species, and the human was totally unaffected. In fact, he seemed excited by the revelation, as if being kidnapped and threatened by a shape-shifting alien was some sort of entertainment rather than a life-threatening situation. It was Logara who broke the silence this time, addressing Noah directly. "Why aren't you affected by our torture?" she asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "Our species has such a bad reputation that being around one of us is usually enough to terrify most beings." Noah's face contorted in utter confusion. "Wait, what do you mean by torture? I thought that he was your boyfriend and we, His expression fell as realization dawned, excitement giving way to disappointment. "I guess we have a serious misunderstanding here," he said in a dejected voice. Brevard struggled to follow what was happening, his mind racing to interpret the human's bizarre reactions. Logara seemed to recognize the misunderstanding first, her borrowed human features showing comprehension. "How could you not be terrified when I revealed my form?" she asked, incredulity evident in her tone. Noah sighed, slumping slightly in his restraints. Earth's relationship with your species is actually very good, he explained, as if lecturing schoolchildren. I've met many Marak in this world. My main task as ambassador here isn't attending events with the Trovirians, but recruiting Maraks who want to immigrate to Earth, and either live there or work as spies for humanity on other planets. The shock rendered both Brevar and Logara speechless. Their entire understanding of galactic politics, and their place within it, seemed to crumble with those few sentences. Brevar had spent decades believing all species universally reviled the Marak. Yet, here was a human claiming the exact opposite. Brevar finally managed to ask,
"That means the way you interfered in our business was to—"
The human cut him off, explaining that it was indeed a way to get them out of their hideouts and reveal themselves to him. "I've been trying to lure you guys out of hiding to make contact with your group for months," Noah said, seeming almost relieved to explain. "Your smuggling operations caught my attention, not because I wanted to shut it down, but because I knew it had to be Marak run. No other species has the infiltration capabilities to move contraband through so many checkpoints undetected." He and Logara were speechless again, exchanging glances that conveyed their shared disbelief. Eventually, she broke the silence, asking the question that had immediately sprung to Brevar's mind. "Why would humans accept our kind in their world despite the danger we offer? Other species fear having their leadership replaced or being infiltrated." Noah leaned back as much as his restraints would allow, his expression relaxed despite the circumstances. "Look, we do have technology to identify Maraks, scanners at immigration checkpoints, that sort of thing," he explained. "But honestly, we barely use it anymore. It turns out when you offer someone a safe home, they tend to drop the whole world domination agenda pretty quickly." He chuckled. "Most Maraks who come to Earth end up working as investigators or spies. One is even hosting a popular talk show." He shrugged casually. "It's hard to maintain revolutionary favor when you're no longer being persecuted. When you're just another citizen with a family and personal goals, plotting world domination seems like a lot of unnecessary work." Brevar crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing with suspicion.
"This sounds like a trap," he said bluntly. "Why would humans welcome a species that could infiltrate their higher levels of government, replace their leaders, their loved ones?" He shook his head. "My entire existence has been defined by hiding, by fighting for scraps on the edge of society. Nobody just offers sanctuary without expecting something in return."
The human finally explained that it wasn't just kindness. "Earth struggled with a lot of alien visitors who couldn't adapt to human culture," Noah said. "The Maraks are the only ones who are capable of fully integrating and being happy about it. It's hardwired into you. Your biology allows you to even create families with humans and live your whole lives happily integrated, without the need to hide who you are." He leaned forward, earnestness in his expression. "Do you even understand how valuable that is? Most species can visit Earth, but they're always outsiders, always struggling to understand our ways. Maraks can truly become part of our society." While Brevar and Logara struggled to let the information sink in, Noah continued, offering them a chance to abandon their life of crime. "Earth is welcoming Maraks by the dozen each month," he said enthusiastically. "I could arrange for a shared house for you both. The transition program is excellent. Language training, cultural orientation, job placement assistance. Most Maraks are working in entertainment, diplomacy, even law enforcement." Logara glanced at Brevar for just a moment and said, "Not saying that I'll accept your offer, but he's just my boss and nothing more." There was a slight edge to her tone, as if clarifying this point was important to her. Noah's eyebrows rose. "Really?" he asked, looking between them with renewed interest. With that, the conversation continued through the night, and what was meant to be a session of torture ended up with the revelation of Noah as a headhunter who was a bit too eager to have them move to Earth or working as spies. This led to the quick release of the human, who was returned to his home with apologies and the promise to consider his offer. 1 month later, they were in Brevar's office. Logara looked like a human, and she had kept that human appearance since the day of their attempted torture. The small space was cluttered with datapads and contraband samples, the accumulated evidence of a smuggling operation that had once seemed so important, but now felt strangely hollow.
"You don't have to go,"
Brevar said, trying to keep the unease from his voice.
"This planet is our little island we've built for ourselves. You're exchanging certainty for something risky."
He gestured around them at the trappings of the life they'd carved out.
"We know how to survive here. Earth is unknown."
Logara stood by the door, a small bag containing her few possessions slung over her shoulder. The human form she had adopted suited her, somehow more natural than the Graxian skin she had worn before. "I appreciate your concern," she said gently, "but I've seen all I need to make my decision. Noah is going to travel with me and help me acclimate to Earth." Brevar felt a surge of something uncomfortably like jealousy at the mention of the human diplomat.
"And you trust him, after we kidnapped and tried to torture him?"
he asked incredulously. A smile touched her lips. "Oddly enough, yes. He understood our situation better than we did ourselves." She took a step toward the door, then paused. "You could come too, you know. The offer wasn't just for me." Brevar shook his head stubbornly.
"Someone needs to stay and lead our people here. Not everyone will want to go to Earth, no matter how welcoming humans can be."
"That's their choice, and yours," she said softly. "But don't make it out of fear or pride. Make it because it's what you truly believe it's the best for them." With that, she was gone, leaving Brevar alone with his thoughts and the growing suspicion that she might be right. He moved to the window, watching as she met Noah at the street level. The human greeted her with a warm embrace that spoke of more than professional courtesy. Together, they walked towards the spaceport, their figures growing smaller until they disappeared into the crowd. Brevar wondered if their small community would be better off hiding themselves in this world or going to Earth like Logara and a few others would do. The news of Noah's offer had spread quickly among the Marak on this planet, and already several had approached Brevar asking about the possibility of relocation. For centuries, the Marak had been defined by their ability to become others, to deeply replicate and infiltrate different species as a means of survival. Perhaps, on Earth, they might finally learn what it meant to be themselves. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. Brevar turned from the window and activated his communication terminal. Noah had left his contact information, just in case. Perhaps it was time to find out more about this Earth and its peculiar humans, who seemed to welcome the very differences that made the rest of the galaxy shun the Marak. After all, he reflected, any species that could mistake a kidnapping and torture attempt for some kind of bizarre mating ritual was strange enough to be interesting, and, perhaps, this strangeness was exactly the seed of hope for his species to finally have a place to call home.